Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is John, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And I am Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
Today we will be discussing episode 9 of the show, titled Finish the Song. While we will not be spoiling any of the comic by extension, any future plots of the show, we will be discussing the details of the series through episode 9. So pause this, go watch the show before you listen to the rest of the episode. You can find more episodes of the podcast at g2tpodcast.com. That's G, number 2, letter T, podcast. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter. And you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show. Share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding our Preacher or our podcast. So all that being said, we're going to jump right into it here. The teaser segment of the episode opens in Ratwater over the schoolhouse with some kids doing multiplication, and you see like a silhouette kind of take over the window. And in the saloon, an Asian man is singing, and the whole saloon falls silent listening to him sing. Cowboy McTavish squeaks in the door, and the man stops singing as everyone turns to look. Preacher starts going off on how the town takes in all kinds of people and calls Cowboy McTavish the Butcher of Gettysburg. He goes on about how everyone can go to heaven if they can welcome Jesus into their hearts, and asks the cowboy if he will accept Jesus. Cowboy says that he loves his horse and his wife and his little girl, and that Jesus can join them in hell, as he tosses a bunch of school kids' heads on the floor that he wrapped in the American flag from the schoolhouse, and asks the Asian man to finish singing as he slaughters the whole saloon, kills the pianist and the singing man, and then takes a drink as a wicked storm rolls in.
Yep.
Pretty intense scene.
Yeah.
So, what? Any additional thoughts as to like what the hell's going on?
I really loved it. That's all.
It was awesome. It was that scene. The opening teasers of the last 4 episodes have been so good, so good.
Yeah, the one in the previous episode was really, and I wasn't here for last week's episode, the previous episode, and the opener for that one was really amazing as well. And finally answered a question I've been wanting to have answered for a while: is what exactly was going on in that room,
right?
When John Custer leaves and Jesse looks in and sees like something horrifying is going on. So this episode, there have been in a few episodes prior to last week's, I felt like it was kind of losing some of those real preachery moments that felt really like unique and things that made me sit forward in my seat and say, right, wow, that's different. And the opening of this one with the shot starting on the man's face singing and then just pulling back to reveal the whole saloon listening was really neat.
Yeah.
And weird. I was like, this probably never actually happened in the Wild West ever. Like it was just this very bizarre moment that I was like, this feels like something out of like Twilight Zone or something eerie and like doesn't make sense.
Right.
It was really cool. And then the line finished the song and then just going the reverse and just back in on him as everyone's getting shot is really sweet. I mean, it's just phenomenally done. Indeed,
I totally agree. So we're going to keep moving here. And full disclosure, I didn't really separate things by acts like Alex normally does because I had procured this particular episode in a manner that is not normal. So I didn't have commercials to cut things up. So I don't know the acts themselves, so we're just going to flip through scene by scene as we go. So the first scene here...
You know what? I actually that's cool because I watched it on an Xfinity On Demand app on my iPad rather than through AMC. Mm-hmm. And I think the commercials may have actually been in different places. They might not have been, but they were spaced really weirdly. Like there was a commercial and then 45 seconds went by and then another commercial and then 20 minutes with no commercial, and then it was really strange.
Okay, so I don't even know. I don't know what act is what, but we'll start out here with the scene opens with the sheriff driving Jesse in the backseat of the cop car. The sheriff asks him where Eugene is, and Jesse replies that he sent Eugene to hell. And the sheriff starts talking about how he's got a friend who works at a prison, and when Jesse goes to prison for killing kids, that the other prisoners don't really take too kindly to child killers. And he talks about an inmate that had killed himself because of the way he was being treated, and the preacher, it tells the preacher that based on prison, he's going to wish he was in hell. And Jesse says, "I'll see you Sunday," and breaks out of the cop car and runs away. Yeah. So that's that first scene there. Pretty funny. I think the sheriff finally starts to realize that, he's not messing around with, just some measly little preacher. He was able to break out of handcuffs to an extent and get out of the cop car. Yeah, which is pretty impossible. Mm-hmm. Not that I would know. I've never been in the back of a cop car. And then the scene flips to Fiore and DeBlanc walking in the rain to a travel agent. They ask the agent to help them go to hell. The agent goes over some of their paperwork, understands that they're undocumented angels on Earth, and they don't have enough money for the pass to hell. So the agent asks for 20 minutes with Fiore in the back, to which DeBlanc says no. And the agent threatens to report them, and they threaten to report her, and she proceeds with processing their paperwork to send them to hell. And any thoughts on that at all, or am I moving too fast?
No,
Okay.
You're fine. That I thought was really interesting. There was something about the way that the relationship between angels and demons, or the way they operate on Earth, that I didn't particularly like in previous episodes in regards to the one Seraphim or whatever they called her, the one who was trying to kill them.
Yeah.
But this I did like, and I'm not sure why I thought this was different to me, but I did like it. I thought it was kind of entertaining. I mean, because the whole thing just comes across as really silly, like the idea that they need
a ticket to hell.
There's a travel agent that can send you to hell somehow, and I just like how vaguely it's all handled. Like, we don't really see much more beyond that.
Right.
So it's good. It made me chuckle. I was like, okay. And this weird little lady like locks her door, and it's just, the whole thing is just
closes the shades,
so overly serious, and
the sheet over the bird cage.
Fiora and DeBlanc are so not serious that the whole thing is just really goofy. And the fact that she says 20 minutes in the bag with him,
with the big
one,
he
just goes, "If that's what it takes," and just starts to stand up. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that was definitely a funny scene. Mm-hmm. Next scene opens with Tulip at her uncle's house, and Emily's knocking on the front door. Tulip opens and lets her in. And Cassidy apparently is not healing well, according to Tulip, and she explains to Emily that Cassidy's a vampire. And she's been giving him animal blood, but it's been, it's not quite working. Like, he needs, more blood of some sort. So she's been getting guinea pigs from the local pet store and tells Emily she needs her to go and do it. And Emily tells Tulip that Jesse's in trouble. And Tulip says that, she's done with Jesse Custer and Emily can have him. And Emily says that she has a boyfriend. It's the mayor, who's cool, I believe is the phrase. He's cool, which is pretty funny. And Emily asks where Tulip's going, and Tulip replies that she's going to go kill a man in Albuquerque. So there's that. She's going after Carlos on her own. Interesting scene, I think. The relationship between Tulip and Emily has changed a lot over the past couple episodes, which is kind of cool. That they're all they're now, it seems like everyone's kind of on the same page, Yeah,
or they at least accept each other.
Right.
They can be friendly. And I agree. I did like that scene as well. I think that the relationship between those two is really fun to watch. And the moment when Tulip is so, she's so like prickly around everybody, and she's very like, she always has this front up. And when she says you can have Jesse, and Emily says I have a boyfriend, and she's like, oh really? And Tulip, just her entire tone shifts away. It's really funny. She just kind of becomes, she's a little bit sarcastic, but it seems like she actually is having a bit of a normal conversation, and it's kind of funny. And Emily's putting up this front of just like, yeah, it's great. I'm really happy. Like, he's been chasing me forever.
And Tulip's just like, I don't believe you. Like, really? Why don't you tell me about him?
Okay, he's cool, huh?
Yeah. And then the scene switches to the preacher. He's under a bridge with a couple of homeless folks, and they help him get his handcuffs off. And they ask him, how he plans on bringing God himself to church on Sunday. And he says, "You'll see," which is pretty funny. They proceed to feed him some pancakes
and some Merlot.
Yeah, and some Merlot at 10 a.m.
Which is awesome. Yeah, I really like that because he knows them by name, by first name.
And I can't remember their names.
Yeah, I don't. I think
totally didn't take
Jane,
notes. Right?
Maybe I don't really remember, but I did like that acknowledgement that Jesse kind of in ways fits in better with the riffraff than the normal so-called normal folk, and that he at least is a good enough dude that he knows everybody. You know, he's actually at least taken that part of his preaching job seriously, that he makes an effort to get to know who everybody is and that kind of thing. It's just a nice scene
for sure.
I really, really like the direction Jesse has shifted into, but it's all happened so abruptly.
Yeah,
like Jesse is the most like kind of pig-headed, I guess arrogant also, like in the whole season so far beyond the pilot, he's been very like, he's been driving towards this one point and he hasn't been listening to anybody else.
Right.
And now all of a sudden this like switch has flipped and we're kind of seeing a little bit more humanity in him that he had at the beginning of the series. It seems to have happened quickly, but maybe it's just because I've watched a few episodes back to back quickly. Maybe
that could be it. You didn't give it time to process or whatever.
But it's refreshing though. I like that Jesse is once again becoming. I guess it all comes to a head with his revelation about Arseface,
right,
or Eugene rather, in the show. But he it is nice to have a little bit more dimension to Jesse again.
Indeed. So the scene flips back to Emily at Tulip's uncle's house, and she is tiptoeing to the room where Cassidy is, and she's holding a guinea pig.
It's a huge guinea pig.
That was a giant guinea pig. And she gets a phone call from Miles saying that he's basically forcing himself into her place. He's going to be staying the night. She doesn't really have any say. And so she's just like, okay, yep, sounds good. Hangs up the phone. And she goes and opens the door to Cassidy's room and sets the guinea pig on the floor and closes the door and locks it real quick. And here's Cassidy kill the guinea pig, and she opens the door to see him, and he's tucked in the corner. He turns around and scares her, and she slams the door shut and leaves the room. That's interesting seeing Cassidy in that light, in my opinion.
Yeah, he
or not so much light, I guess.
Yeah, in that phase,
right?
Yeah, it was pretty gross and pretty kind of freaky because you're used to. Even though you, as the viewer, have knowledge from the first scene of Cassidy that he's a vampire,
right?
He's very fun to watch. He's very charming and likable.
Yep.
And as a viewer, you like him, and then you see him kind of for what he really is, just like a really gross, scary creature of the dark,
right?
Just a monster, and it's pretty shocking, I think, as a viewer as well, because you feel kind of a mixture of feeling bad for him, but I also just kind of felt a little gross myself. I was kind of like, ew, this is a guy you actively root for a lot, and now you've seen him reduced to this scabby creature eating a guinea pig.
And I feel like this episode particularly, I felt like had a ton of these kind of jump scare moments. Like it was trying to get you out of your seat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely has some unsettling parts for sure. It goes a little bit more.
It's finally doing all of this unmasking, and really showing you who's what and what's what.
This is probably the episode that pushed the TV limits.
Oh
a
yeah,
lot
for
in
sure.
terms of what you can do. It's pretty gross.
Yeah,
there's a lot of just blood and guts, and a lot of the violence is finally coming to pass.
For sure.
Nobody got their dick shot off in this episode, but
yeah, that was pretty funny in that last one. So scene flips to Fiore and DeBlanc are in the hotel. They're packing up their stuff, and they're actually debating whether or not they want to go to hell or just go back to heaven. And DeBlanc goes, well, why don't we flip a coin? If it's heads, we go to heaven. If it's tails, we go to hell. And Fiore's like, oh, a coin flip. We haven't done that in a while or something like that.
Yeah, that's really funny.
And so they basically, the first flip has them going to hell. Tails, they go to hell, and Fiore looks at DeBlanc and goes, double or nothing. And so they do a second flip, and it's to heaven. They get super pumped and excited, and DeBlanc tells Fiore to grab the phone. So Fiore goes to grab the phone from under the bed, and it's gone. And DeBlanc flips out on him about leaving the phone with a direct line to heaven under the bed. And then they basically just decide they better go to hell because there's no way they're getting back into heaven now.
Yeah, that was a great scene. I really liked. I liked watching Fiore weigh out the options when he was kind of talking about going to heaven and dealing with them and how that seems really shitty. And he's like, I don't really want to do that. And then he goes, of course, on the other hand, we'll be going to hell. So
right,
tough choice, I think is what he says. And it's really funny. These two, their chemistry has just strengthened. I feel like with every scene with them, they become. I think we also become more comfortable with them. Like when you first few episodes of the series, when you see them, you're just like, ew, these guys are gross. They're weird. I don't want to see them. I don't really want to deal with them. You're intrigued, but you're kind of repulsed. And now I just love watching them. Whenever they show up, I'm like, okay, something funny.
Yeah, they're hilarious because they're both they're just, they're like best friends, and they're inseparable. And if,
yeah, that's what he says. He says, if we go to heaven, they'll separate us forever.
Right.
And they're both real sad. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute.
And so it's interesting to see, we've definitely watched their whole relationship develop over time and become something much bigger. So that's pretty cool. So the scene flips to Jesse hiding from a cop car driving by, and you see he's got their phone tucked in his jacket.
That's where there was a commercial. I do remember that commercial.
That was a real quick clip, and then it switches to another scene. Mm-hmm. So he's basically kind of reminding you who's got the phone,
right?
And so it goes back to Emily.
Well, I think he's at the hotel, right? Is he behind?
Maybe he was behind the hotel.
I thought
I couldn't tell based on the positioning of the camera or anything. Like it wasn't very indicative. Of
I couldn't either, but
I
didn't remember him taking it.
Yeah.
So I thought he must have.
Maybe he snuck in and took it.
I think he's like in the back of the hotel, like hiding, and then he's about to.
Yeah, well, that would make sense because he was there when they were taking care of the Seraphim, so he kind of knows like where everything is. I guess if it's his part of his skill set of knowing where things are, or like having a photographic memory of sorts to like remember details like that. But the scene flips to Emily at Tulip's uncle's house watching TV, and Cassidy yells that he's hungry. Key scene here, I think, is the movie that's playing on the TV, I believe, is Psycho.
Yes.
And I don't recall the exact scene, but it's talking about how, like, basically feeling trapped. And I read an interesting comment on Reddit about how this scene is very important because it's basically displaying to the viewers, like, Emily's sitting there watching this scene and letting all of this the dialogue sink in that she's basically trapped in her current relationship with Miles. And so Cassidy yells that he's hungry and he wants to be let out. And the scene flips to Miles at the King Cannon Meat and Power watching men wrestle in Odin's office. What the hell is that all about? I don't even know, but
just more good old boys.
Odin's just chilling. He's standing on top of his desk, drinking his brandy, like watching these guys wrestle. Like,
just throw each other into the ground. Yeah,
I guess that happens in the South. I wouldn't really know.
I really love seeing what Odin does to pass the time.
Yeah, just all always his facial expressions and mannerisms are just hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Miles gets a call from Emily saying that she's, the quote, he's gotten out and she's in hiding, and Miles heads over to the house and goes in the room where Cassidy's being held, and Emily kind of jumps up on him, slams the door shut, and Cassidy kills him.
Yep.
So, interesting turn of events here. As I was saying, like Emily was watching that movie and realizing that she's kind of trapped and she's got to get out. Well, here's your out.
Yeah, it was pretty gruesome, I thought, actually.
It was a weird change of pace for her character.
Yeah.
So,
and I was like, wow. That's brutal. Like poor Miles didn't
see it coming.
Not such a bad guy.
Yeah.
Didn't deserve that. That reminds me too when she's describing him earlier to Tulip, and she says Miles, and she's kind of like, who? And to the mayor, and she's like, oh yeah, blonde hair, khakis.
Yeah.
The fact that she identified him by khakis is really funny. Because
I
remember Alex and I laughing about that in a previous episode. That when he was picking out his khakis like that. Choosing which pair he was going to wear that day is just really funny. But it's funny because I feel like it's a good way to get Miles out of the picture because he's clearly helping Odin.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember now, and I'm pretty sure he does tell Emily that. Yeah, he does. Before, when he tells her about the church, and she says, "What about the church?" And he says, "Odin's got it. He's going to destroy it, and I'm going to help him because that's going to help the town." So Emily is kind of, in a way,
she's got her own motive.
Yeah,
other than just getting out of her relationship.
Yeah,
with him.
She's also kind of trying to jam up Odin, which is interesting in a very crazy way, and also helping Cassidy, kind of.
Yeah,
which is interesting because she doesn't really seem to care too much for Cassidy. So it's not maybe that's third on the list of why she's doing it, but it's still interesting.
Indeed. So the sheriff gets a call to the Sundowner Motel, and he gets called to Fiore and DeBlanc's room, and he finds the Seraphim in the tub with her arms and legs missing. So we finally figure out what exactly Fiore did to her. She basically sits there and begs the sheriff to kill her, which he gives in, strangles her. She reappears behind him as he's strangling her, and she leaves. Real quick scene.
Yeah, that was really brutal, and I think that's a pretty huge scene for the whole kind of thrust of at least the comic, and I guess sort of by the show, the idea that people and person in Jesse specifically is let down by God and God's apparent just removal from caring what humanity does, and Jesse's whole objective in the book is to make God answer for why he's abandoning creation. Basically, why do the age old question of why do bad things happen? If God's so good, and that scene I thought was a really amazing way of displaying that because Sheriff Root is a pretty good dude, and in the book he's a really bad dude. And in the show, he's a pretty good character. Like, he's a pretty decent human,
Right.
And he's still trying to get by. And we see some scenes that he does some bad things. He says some aggressive things to Eugene that are really nasty. But then he says to Odin in the previous episode that, they have hard times, but without Eugene, he'd be lost. He's like, he loves him. He's his son. He says, I don't know what I'd do without him. Mm-hmm. And that's really sad. And in this scene, Sheriff Root clearly doesn't want to kill this woman, but he doesn't want to make her. He sees someone who's going to spend the rest of her life suffering, and in a way, he probably thinks of Eugene,
right?
And that makes him sad to think someone else is going to be that way because he thinks she's just a girl. And so he strangles her, and she reappears behind him and watches him while he's like clearly like, at a breaking point,
right?
And she just walks away. She doesn't tell him like, "Hey, it's cool. I'm an angel. You saved me," which. That would be crazy, and he would be like, oh my God, his mind would be blown. But wouldn't it be a little bit merciful to let him know that he did a good thing and it's okay rather than he just like murdered a girl? You know what I mean?
Maybe he did. Like maybe he feels that way, like he did a good thing, and maybe he sees like I'm gonna have to kill my son, like to save him. Maybe like you're seeing this good character now. Maybe he's going to have the shift into being the bad character.
That's true.
And realize that like, I need to put Eugene out of his misery.
I just think regardless of where that decision sends Sheriff Root, I think it's an example of you have an angel who's supposed to be
good,
a force of goodness and reassurance to a person, at least in our perception,
right?
And she chooses to let him live with this idea that he killed a girl in a bathtub who was missing her arms and her legs. She doesn't reassure him or anything. She just walks away and lets him deal with it and process it. And I was like, wow, that's pretty intense. That's kind of brutal to let the poor guy just simmer on his conscience that he did that. Conscience.
Or maybe he will kind of feel, he'll feel along the lines of like, maybe Preacher did the right thing in, thinking like he thinks Jesse killed Eugene. So maybe it's one of those things where he's like, I'm doing this out of mercy, and maybe Jesse did it out of mercy in a way. Or like maybe now, like since Eugene's gone, dead, killed, whatever, he's no longer going to suffer.
It is weird about Eugene. I wonder what... He doesn't seem to have come to any real conclusion on what he thinks happened to Eugene. He's just kind of letting things happen right now. And I think we'll see, obviously we have to in the next episode, kind of what he's thinking. So
yeah.
Anyway.
So the next scene, it flips to Fiore and DeBlanc on the side of the road, which is actually a nice ode to Breaking Bad. It's the same road that Walter White and Saul Goodman stand on the side of towards the end of Breaking Bad. I'm not going to give any more details for those who haven't watched Breaking Bad. If you haven't watched it, you should be ashamed of yourself. The tourist bus rolls up, and the driver says, "No carry-ons." And Fiore looks at DeBlanc and says, "What about my comics?" And DeBlanc says, "It's all right, my dear. Leave them behind." And this, I was, again, reading on Reddit, this was a pivotal scene because this was basically like the, Seth Rogen and what's his name? The other guy.
Leaving the comics behind.
Yeah. You got to leave the comics behind, guys, and just move on and like let it happen, see where things go. So I found that kind of an interesting little nod to not only Breaking Bad, but the, readers of the comics, like, hey guys, like this is something different. So maybe from here, there's going to be a much bigger departure from the comics.
Well, it's funny, too, because the comics are literally baggage in the show.
Right. So, I didn't think about it that way, but that makes perfect sense. And then, so the scene flips, and Emily is letting some of Cassidy's his guinea pig snacks go free, and Jesse shows up looking for Tulip. And Emily says that she went to Albuquerque and tells Jesse that his mate is inside, and Jesse goes inside, and Cassidy tells him to go away because it's not safe. Jesse sees that Cassidy killed Miles and says, and Cassidy says he'll kill Jesse too. Cassidy says, "I told you what I was, and now you see." And Jesse says that he can't leave, and that he's not going anywhere. And Jesse says that Cassidy saw what he really was too, and that he's really sorry for letting Cassidy burn for that long. And Cassidy replies that all that matters is that Jesse put him out. So they decide to. They're sitting there, and Cassidy looks at Jesse, and Jesse goes, "If you were me and I killed the mayor, what would you do?" And Cassidy says, "Well, I'd help you bury the body. I'd help you get rid of the body." So they shape up to get rid of the body. And I thought this is a pretty cool scene. Now they both have cards all the way out on the table in a way, and they know what they're both capable of, and they both just are like, let's just we're better off as friends, so let's just keep this rolling.
Let's just keep this rolling. That's a perfect way to describe it.
I mean, that's what it is. Like, they're literally like this. Which, by the way, the makeup on Cassie was amazing. Like,
it was really good.
It looked disgusting, and like he looked so. Like, I felt bad for him.
He just looked unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a really good scene. I think that at the very beginning of it, I really liked how cool and collected Emily is.
Yeah,
she's very just matter of fact, and now she's like, all right, I got to go pick up my kids, and she's like, all right, I'm going to go do it, and doesn't tell Jesse like what happened, and just leaves and lets him sort it out for himself. It's kind of funny. I think the Cassidy Jesse scene is interesting because in the comics he doesn't care that he's a vampire, really. He doesn't want him to kill people, though.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes there are scenes where they get in, like, bar fights together and stuff, and he tells him not to kill people. But other than that, he doesn't mind him being a vampire. And so now I think that we're kind of around to that where we just kind of accept it and be like, okay,
right,
that's cool. And he doesn't, again, no one seems to give a shit that Miles is dead. He's just kind of like, oh, you mean you killed the mayor. All right.
Yeah.
Guess we better go hide him.
No, and it's I mean, I thought it was interesting just the interaction between Emily and Jesse too, that like she basically she knows everything now in a way, minus the whole Genesis thing. She has no clue on that, but she knows everything else. Like, she knows Tulip's role, she knows Cassidy's role as well as what he is. So basically, like, these two other characters that have come into Jesse's life that she had no idea of before, she now knows what their role is in a way.
That's true.
And so she's kind of just like, okay, like, you clearly weren't telling me everything and you're not going to. And she's just like, whatever, I'm going to just go about my day and move on and blah, 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 go on with my life. So
I like, too, the little beat where Jesse tells Cassidy that he's sorry for a lot of things or something. And Cassidy says, you're the preacher with the kung fu moves and the pretty girl. And he's like, what do you have to be sorry about?
Right.
I thought that was pretty good. And then Jesse says basically like something along the lines of he has a lot to be sorry for. And again, a little vague. And I like that we're now kind of delving into more of Jesse's past. Like, we saw what he's capable of, like fighting dudes with hand to hand, and then he whoops a bunch of dudes' asses inside the church, and then he's shooting dicks off, and he's just an expert marksman, as Odin says, in the church. And it's just funny how there seems to be no end to the crazy skills that Jesse has.
For sure. Yeah, this might be a good spot for me to bring up some feedback that Alex actually sent me. By the way, Alex is out of town. I didn't mention that. And I'm filling in for him. I'm John, again, from Midwest Game Nerds. But, yeah, so
Hi, John. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. He sent me this little bit of feedback here. He said, listening to the Preacher Insider podcast for episode 8, Sam Caitlin mentions that Genesis feels as though it has a home in Jesse. And Alex says that my guess is that Jesse can house Genesis unlike the other people it killed because Jesse is closer to 50-50 good and evil compared to previous hosts. The other hosts couldn't handle the devil side of Genesis, but because of the darkness John Custer sees in Jesse and the turmoil that Jesse feels to be one of the good guys, he has the duality that Genesis also has. So very interesting concept here to see the good and evil balance there.
Yeah,
I like it's fun picking apart things like this.
Yeah, and no, that's a great observation. Definitely, Jesse definitely is constantly struggling with the his good nature and his bad nature, and
exactly.
He's gonna, I think, try to find a way to merge the two into one, and kind of, because he seems to be living right now. He's trying to be one thing, and he was another, and he's kind of trying to have it one way or the other, and not try to find a way to merge all these two sides of his personality into one character, which is kind of the way Jesse from the books is. So I think that he's kind of starting to come to terms with certain things about himself, or at least knowing that at least it can be useful in terms of protecting his church. So yeah, that's awesome. Good job, Alex.
And okay, so this next scene flips to Cannon in his office, basically just talking at Donnie, and he's talking about how Jesse Custer and how he's going to denounce God in front of the whole town on Sunday.
Yep.
Quick little snippet there. And then it flips back to Jesse and Cassidy are back at Tulips. Cassidy's trying to use the direct line to heaven, and Jesse tells him that they need angel hands. Cassidy says he can get angel hands.
How many? He's like, how many do you need? 3 or 4?
And Jesse goes and calls Tulip and leaves her a message about, it's a story about her eating M&M pancakes at a diner when they were working back in 2010. And Jesse tells Tulip that for him, it's just her until the end of the world. And the scene flips to Tulip is sitting across from Carlos, who is tied up. And she walks up to him holding a meat tenderizer and says, "All right, Carlos," and then the scene ends. So
do you think, first of all, that was an amazing scene.
Yes.
Dominic Cooper is just phenomenal at moments like this. He's consistently, throughout the series, proven to have these like little moments of just really, really taking this great dialogue and really just flourishing with it. And we get the impression that Tulip is listening. She
Right.
looks like she's listening to the message. And then when I saw she's seated opposite Carlos, I was kind of like, was she, or is she just looking looking at Carlos, trying to think of what to do? And I saw,
Right.
so when she stands up, I saw her phone. I think it was her phone on the arm of the chair. So was she listening to the voicemail, or did we just get hoodwinked again?
yeah,
by
I
the
don't know.
show?
Like I kind of want to assume that she beat the crap out of Carlos, tied him up, and in that time span, Jesse was leaving the message, and then while she takes a minute to kind of gather herself, she listens to the message, and that was just like the last bit of
yeah,
fuel she needed to finish the fight.
could be. I wasn't sure because that when we initially see that shot of her, she looks like she's taking it in what he's saying.
Yeah.
And then it was revealed that maybe she's actually not hearing him at all, and he's just leaving this message in kind of it's almost kind of a not a plea. It's an apology of sorts, but it doesn't sound like he's trying to stop her from what she's doing.
Yeah.
So it's but what a great chunk of script right there. Like such a great story
sure.
and perfectly in keeping with both these characters and kind of painting that picture for us that they were once in a way their own twisted kind of Bonnie and Clyde, and there's kind of a sweetness and a real love story there, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
That was great scene.
All right. And we get to the final scene of the episode, which is like a series of scenes, really. So we flash back to Cowboy McTavish's daughter laying sick in the bed, and then all of a sudden we replay all of the cowboy sequences over and over chronologically about 5 or 6 times, I want to say. I didn't actually count how many times I went through it. But
yeah, they get down to like 10-second recaps.
They did a few times, and it was gradually speeding up, and it turns out that the cowboy is in hell, or rather his particular instance of hell, which is suited particularly to him. Fiore and DeBlanc show up and ask him if he wants all of this to end. They say they have a job for him, and he says, "What job?" And DeBlanc says, "Come with us and we'll show you," and the cowboy shoots him in the head. Fiore's kind of stumbling and like whimpering in a way and gulping, and he tells the cowboy that the job is to kill a preacher. And then the storm outside gets really ripping, and the clouds and the lightning kind of hit the ground. I don't know exactly what happened with the clouds and the lightning, but it looked as though like something may have come down. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
That.
I mean, it basically kind of time lapses from Ratwater to Anvil. So yeah, Ratwater is Anvil.
Yeah, and it's just this wicked storm, and like it fades into it fades into Jesse and Cassidy digging in the desert, and they dig up the box that Cassidy buried the previous models of Fiore and DeBlanc in, and Cassidy takes a hand from one of them and tosses it to Jesse, and they toss the mayor's body in the hole along with the other dead animals, and as they're filling in the hole with dirt, Cassidy says, "God, going to Texas?" And Jesse says, "Sunday morning." And Cassidy says, "That'll be something." Jesse goes, "Yep." And then the scene ends. So those two are clearly back to normal.
Yeah. That's the scene where Cassidy says, "How many do you need?
Yeah,
3 or 4?" There's a whole
3,
bunch
4.
of them down there. But yeah, to rewind, that was a good scene because then we get to see them kind of just broing out again.
Yep.
Even though they're dealing with bodies and severed angel hands and stuff, it's pretty funny. But the scene with the cowboy is really interesting because I kept wondering at the end of each of those, and the bottles are rattling, and I was like, "Is there a tornado coming through?" And I was wondering, like, is that how he dies? Like, does he get killed in that storm, or what? Like, we don't really know exactly what happens to him or what leads him to hell.
Yeah.
Or was his act so egregious that he's immediately claimed and pulled right down to hell to start dealing with? Yeah, we don't really know what the end cap of his story is, and at least in the show. We don't know how he winds up exactly where he winds up, but the storm feels almost like kind of him in a way. Like it's this just unstoppable force that blew into Ratwater,
right?
Killed everything, and it's just been sitting on Ratwater. And then the way the storm kind of comes. It's tough to say exactly what happens because it looks almost like the storm is still there, and it turns to Anvil, and then it kind of goes away. And like you said, there's that lightning strike, and I think that it's just kind of reminding us that the cowboy was here all along, kind of.
Right.
And he's now going to be the storm that's sent to take out Jesse. Do you think DeBlanc is dead? Do you think DeBlanc is gone?
I don't know. I want to say based off of the way Fiore was acting that maybe that is the case. Like, he looked legitimately frightened, which for two characters that can kind of like clone themselves. I don't. What was the term they used for like coming back? I can't remember it.
I don't even know. I remember they just said it just happens.
They did. There is a term for it.
Yeah.
They dropped it in episode 6. I can't remember what it is though. But just the way he was reacting to what had happened makes me believe that maybe DeBlanc is no longer with us.
It's just toast. Yeah. No, I kind of think so too.
So that's kind of frightening in a way because I like the two of them.
Yeah. Well, there's a minor spoiler for the comics, I guess. I don't know if I should really talk too much about it.
Don't do it.
Okay.
Sorry. I know you want to. I can tell by the way you look. But I'm not going to let you do it, man.
No, it's a very similar instance to that exchange in the bar, in the Hell bar with.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fine. It's very early in the comics. It's in like issue 2 or 3. So if you read the first couple, you'll see it and right in.
I'm just super pumped to see how the cowboy is incorporated into this story because you were left hanging for. What are we, 9 episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now you know. I mean, kind of.
do.
It just hasn't happened. I've been dying to talk about this since episode 2. Is that when the cowboy first showed up? I think it was
so,
episode 2 or 3. Dying to talk about it, and I still can't really yet because they just haven't come out and said it. So next week for the finale, I think it's next week. It's not 2 weeks away, is it? I know this is episode 9.
Okay.
But is the finale actually next week?
I think so.
Okay. Well, either way, during the finale episode, I have a feeling that Alex and I will do a bit of a, not spoiler, but we'll be able to discuss openly a lot of what's going on.
No, that's cool. And I know Alex wants to do like a whole season wrap-up episode, too.
Yeah.
So he'll get Lance in here, and I'll be joining as well.
Sweet.
Have a party. I think it'll be a good one. Overall, I think this episode was awesome. I liked it a lot. I will say this. This episode got me to the point where I actually went on Reddit and started looking things up. And I probably spoiled a few things for myself, which is, I mean, I'm fine with that because I spoil all kinds of... Like, I listened to the Film Nerds podcast, and I listened through the spoiler sections for every movie you guys review. And it doesn't bother me when I actually go see the movies. Like, I don't know why. Like, I know people that get livid over spoilers. And
right.
Like, I just don't care.
It depends on how much.
I think I've been desensitized by all the people who watch The Walking Dead. I just kind of gave up on spoilers in general.
Yeah, Facebook is just The Walking Dead forum, basically.
Yeah. So, but overall, I think this episode was awesome. This one was the turning point for me in terms of like actually wanting to like pursue more Preacher, like really pursue more. Like I said, going on Reddit and reading more things. And now I actually want to go out and buy the comics and read them. And I want to I want to be more invested in this. So,
I'm telling you, man, it's such a phenomenal story, and the show has done a tremendous job so far of really, really capturing a lot about the books and kind of making it its own, which is important. Yeah.
It's good. It's good to hear that from someone who has such a high regard for the comics.
I mean, I am saying this now, obviously, because in episode 9 we finally have we've got the cowboy caught up to where he needs to be caught up to, and that's going to be so good. And that's all I have to say.
Well, and I know Alex mentioned, I think back in episode 6 that it was picked up for a second season.
Yep,
which is awesome. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get more Preacher. Mm-hmm. Which is that's super exciting, and it's good to hear someone who has such a high regard for the comics feel this way about the show, because I know Alex received some hate messages from some people, assuming we were affiliated with AMC. I don't know if he told you about that.
Spoiler alert: we are not an official AMC podcast.
Yeah, we're not. No. We're just fans, man.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
But the whole exchange was hilarious.
It was, yeah. In the end, it was an honest mistake, I guess, but still strange.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But anyways, so once again, you can find some more episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com.
Is that where the episode ended?
Yeah, that was it.
Oh.
It ended with them burying the body and then
I thought there was another scene. Okay.
Nope, that was it. Unless I missed something. I don't think I did.
No, I guess not.
I watched it twice today, so hopefully
probably not.
I think I got it. Well, it's the thing when you procure particular episodes of TV shows off of means that are not necessarily the proper ones. I don't know if I got everything. I just assume I did. Which
no, I know it ended here's the thing. I was watching a lot of other Netflix over the weekend, and so where all these episodes end is all a little bit jumbled up in my head right now. But yeah, I guess that... No, you're right. Yeah, that does close it out.
Yeah. So, again, G2Tpodcast.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We are also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com. That is the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast. You can tell us what you think of our show. Share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. You can definitely correct me because I don't know what I'm doing. Again, I'm filling in for Alex. I'm John from the Midwest Game Nerds podcast. If you want to hear Nick and Alex talk about film with a few other of our friends, be sure to check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com. And the Midwest Podcast Network's Midwest Game Nerds, that's my show. You can listen to us at midwestgamenerds.com. All of these shows are available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Music. Please do go ahead and rate and review all of our shows. Gone to Texas, Midwest Film Nerds, Midwest Game Nerds. We would really appreciate any and all help you guys can do in regards to that stuff. Our theme music is the song All In by The Red Thread and is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. Wow, that's kind of hard to say. So all that being said, Nick, thanks again for joining me. And these guys will have you back next week with Alex, probably, most likely.
Yes, sir.
Cool. So all that being said, go forth and speak the good word.